The ANSI standard for SQL only has DML commands, select, insert, update, delete, DCL commands, grant, alter, revoke, and DDL commands, create, alter, drop. And those are just the specific commands for working within the database and objects within the database. So the ANSI SQL itself does not have any way of doing any stored procedures or controlling procedural flow or anything like that, which is why every database vendor has to come along and add extensions to SQL so that they can actually create a language to work with procedures. And of course, T-SQL, Microsoft's Transact SQL, has to do the same thing, and that's where we get controlling procedural flow from. Admittedly, the if command here is a very simple implementation of the if command compared to other languages like C or even Visual Basic. The reason I say this is your grandfather's if, so to speak, is that the if command only controls the next line. There's no end if to automatically finish up a block. So here, if 1 is equal to 0, and we know that'll be false, it'll only control whether or not print line 1 executes. Print line 2 will then always execute. So we only get line 2. If we change this temporarily to 1 equals 1, you'll see then we get line 1 and line 2. Let me Control Z to undo my edit. And I can't tell you how many times I've been helping someone debug code, or even my own code, and you wonder what's going on. It's just not behaving the way you expect it to. And it's this right here that is getting you, the fact that you're expecting the if to control more than it's actually controlling. And this can be confusing if you have a lot of code in there. You can put multiple lines together within a block if you specifically contain that block using a begin-end. So for example here, the if statement controls whether or not the begin-end executes. So in this example, nothing runs. Change it to a true condition, and now they both run within the block. Within database code, it's common to test for the presence of some rows, and then if some rows are present, to do a certain process or to do a certain update or to move data around, something like that. The best way to do that is to say if exists, and this is the same exists we saw in the where clause earlier. It says if there's any row present returned by this select statement, as soon as we see one row, consider this entire exists to be a true Boolean expression and make the if statement true, and then go on. So for example here we're saying if there are any orders that have not been closed out, then go ahead and we're just simulating processing orders. One note I'll make about the if exists is that as I'm doing code reviews, I often see code where the developer is actually taking a select count and then looking to see what the value of that count is. And the if exists will be much more efficient because it can say true right on the first row and then continue on. Similar to the if, but controlling a looping process, is the while. And again, compared to other languages, this while is pretty simple. The while is going to control either the next single line or the next begin-end block. And as long as that while is true, it will continue to execute that next begin-end block or single line over and over again. In this example, we're declaring a variable called @temp, and we're initializing it to 0. And remember, it's important to initialize it to 0 because if it remains a null, then incrementing it will never actually increment. So it begins as a 0. It's true that it's less than 3. This will execute 3 times as this is incremented. As soon as it's no longer less than 3, the while will continue on with whatever code is down below. And just to test this, sure enough, it ran 3 times, and here are the values that we returned. And it's true, T-SQL has a goto command. In fact, the goto command is rarely, if ever, used. The only time I've seen it used is in error handling, where when there is an error, you want to jump down to the error handler. So for example, here there's just goto, the error handler. Putting a colon after it turns that into a label, which can be a destination for a goto. So the flow of control here is going to be goto error handler. It jumps down to error handler, and then we'll return logging the error, so more code is not executed. And to prove it out, we only see logging the error. The goto jumped over more code.